Good morning, church. Calling the faithful. Today's date is April the 14th. Tomorrow is tax day.
Turn your lights on.
What day?
Huh?
Turn your lights on. Tax day.
Is it on? No. He fixed it. I can hear it now. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Today's date is the 14th of April. As I said, tax day is tomorrow. Yes. Trying to keep, we're doing our part to keep government open. Welcome to everyone who is tuned in on Zoom. Family members, church members, guests, everyone, those who will also be watching on the Zoom channel. This is the 7th lesson of examining our faith. Don't you think it's a great idea that we examine our faith? Paul writes about that, I believe, in the second letter, about trying to find out if we are in the faith or not. And also trying to find out is, what do we really understand about the faith that we say we have, and the body of doctrine that sums up our faith. That's very important. And so this is the 7th lesson. Just keep your eye on that picture. That is an artist's impression. Our scripture will be Luke 7, 1 to 10, actually. And the reason I have this picture up, artist impression, is because of what is mentioned in these first 5 verses. When Jesus had finished talking all of this to the people who were listening to him, he entered Capernaum. This will be his HQ for a while. It's located, Warner, if I'm correct, in the northwest corner of Galilee, on the Sea of Galilee. And so there a centurion servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and was about to die. By the way, you will find a similar passage, but with some extra stuff added to it in Matthew chapter 8. That will be in our slides this morning. So there is this centurion who has a servant. He's highly valued. He's sick and he's dying. The centurion had heard of Jesus and sent some of the elders, some elders of the Jews, to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly. This man deserves to have you do this. And then this is why I've got this picture up. Because he loves our nation, the centurion, not the servant, but the centurion loves the nation of Israel and has built our synagogue. This is an artist's impression of a modest kind of synagogue. Warner, I tried to find how many synagogues there might have been in the area of Capernaum. One would think one large synagogue would have been enough. Was this the same synagogue that Jesus went to that was built by the centurion, or was it a more modest type of synagogue? So,
Some archaeological remains of one from the 4th century, but it was rock basalt, and it would have held up over 100.
So here is a picture of some excavations of remaining parts of the ancient synagogue in Capernaum that might have been associated with Jesus. This is another view of the doorway of the synagogue there in Capernaum. Again, unless the centurion was very, very, very wealthy, I don't think he could have afforded to have built such a place. And what I think about is, wouldn't there have been some objection to a Gentile building? Perhaps if he did build the synagogue, it was built not with his own bare hands, but provided funds to facilitate the building of a synagogue. There is a centurion. Wouldn't I look good in that in the pulpit?
With a bagpipe.
Yes, or it looks like a hypnotized snake in his hand. But verses 6 and 8, so Jesus went with them, went back to where the servant is dying with these Jewish elders. He went with them, and he was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof." Some Jews in ancient times wouldn't allow a Gentile to cross the threshold of their home, let alone build a synagogue. But I've got some things to share about Gentiles building synagogues. So that is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. Or, in other words, I've put this in parentheses, just give the command and it will be so. Like Picard on the spaceship Star Trek. "For I myself am a man under authority," he said. He understood authority. He understood what it meant to say, jump, and those under his command would say, how high? He had the authority behind him. He had, what he's wearing there says, "This is my authority." So say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. And I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. Here is an icon showing Jesus healing the servant that has already been mentioned in Luke chapter 7. But Jesus doesn't come to the bedside. He does it at a distance. Verses 9 and 10, when Jesus heard this, Jesus was amazed. Jesus was amazed. He was amazed at... Now, here's something that you will find. It would appear that Jesus doesn't go to the house. He's on his way to the centurion's house, to heal the individual, but the message comes back is, I'm not worthy to have you darken my door. But when you read the account in Matthew chapter 8, it would appear that Matthew is leaning towards Jesus actually speaking to the centurion himself. So think about that. And turning to the crowd, following him, everywhere Jesus went, he had a following. It was sort of like the first century version of the paparazzi without the paparazzi. He had a big following. Some were for him, and some weren't sure, and some were definitely against him. Turning to the crowd following him, he says, I tell you, I have not found such great faith, even in Israel. And then the man who had been sent, the Jewish elders, the messengers, returned to the house and found the servant well. So, here's a little bit about the centurion and the synagogue, and I did some reading of a professor at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and this is the late professor and Rabbi Shemuel Safari. This story about Jesus and a centurion, he wrote, poses a historical and a halakhic, try and say that 10 times, a halakhic question. How is it possible that a non-Jew and an officer in the Roman army, no less, would build a synagogue for Jews in the land of Israel? He must have been there for quite some time. What is a centurion? It's basically a commander of 100. So there's more. Would you like to hear more? Non-Jews, an article, again, written by the late professor and rabbi, Safre, he cited Isaiah 56 and verse 7. He says, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. What did the temple and the tabernacle basically have? Several different areas. You had a court of the women. You also had a court of the Gentiles. That was way out. You weren't up close to where the priests and the high priest would enter. But he says, Isaiah 56 and verse 7, and this is his opinion, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. He says this prophecy is reflected in the everyday life of the Second Temple period, especially in the first century. Gentiles came to the temple in Jerusalem to worship the Lord. And many also were found in the synagogues of the land of Israel and in the diaspora. Finding Gentiles in synagogues as described in the book of Acts, Acts 13, Acts 14, Acts 17, Acts 18, is very much in keeping with the reality of the late Second Temple period and immediately afterward, as numerous rabbinic sources also seem to indicate. Jesus heals this man remotely. Have you ever lost the remote? We have 4 remotes to see things on our telly. Yeah, so I tried to buy a universal remote, but it universally wouldn't work. So, think back to the first modem-equipped computer that you ever owned or had. Mine was a Prodigy, and it was a bulky thing, and absolutely useless. I could connect with the University of Prague, but it was all in Pragish, or whatever they speak there. Isn't it Czech? So in the early days of modem-equipped computers, it allowed the academics and computer nerds to access distant service around the world. I remember running up the stairs. This was when we lived in Missouri. And I said to Judith, this was like 11 o'clock or close to midnight. I mean, a great way to waste your time. I says, guess where I've just been? I says, I've been to Czechoslovakia. I've been to Argentina. I've been to this place and that place. She said, oh, good, you know. Now, today, we take the internet for granted. Now, let me say this. Al Gore thinks he invented the internet. I don't think so. I invented it. I mean, any one of you could have invented the internet. And the only thing was, they've made computers so much more sophisticated. Now we carry a whole computer in the palm of our hand. It's called an iPhone or an Android phone. We take the internet for granted. We can call relatives in distant locations. We could be teaching online classes. Physical distance was a challenge to communication in Jesus' day. We can easily see that in today's lesson, Luke chapter 7, first 10 verses. What is difficult to see and understand is the positive importance that physical distance played in communicating with Jesus. You just couldn't lift your iPhone up and call the Jesus phone. You had to hotfoot it to wherever he was. Sometimes he would show up in person. Sometimes he showed up in person after the guy was 4 days dead and could still do wonderful things. And then there are other times where he crossed great distances in order to accomplish what was requested. So, let's get into the lesson context. The physical context of the lesson for today is Capernaum. It's a village located on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Capernaum became something of a headquarters for Jesus' preaching. Capernaum is mentioned in the New Testament 16 times. 5 of the disciples were residents of Capernaum when Jesus called them to follow him. 4 fishermen, James, John, Peter, and Andrew, and 1 tax collector. Tomorrow's tax day, just want to let you know. Matthew, also known as Levi. There's Capernaum, where the red pin is. You see it right there? Sea of Galilee. This is an artist's impression of what it might have looked like in the first century. Capernaum is translated as Nahum's village. Peter's house and the ancient synagogue that is there. See the red arrow? That's a church building that's built on top of and around what many believe is Peter's house. So Peter's house is literally underground. The ancient synagogue, which is quite elaborate. To be honest, I doubt if that centurion in Luke 7 built that edifice or funded it. Don't you think Rome would have had something to say about that? So, what are you looking at there? These are the ancient ruins of Peter's house. These are the ancient ruins of the village of Capernaum. Mike, did you and Bev visit Capernaum? The lesson context then. So we know Capernaum was this small, it started out as a small village, but it became a thriving regional hub for 3 reasons. Number 1, the fishing industry provided steady income for a lot of families. Number 2, Capernaum was situated on the main road from Damascus into the region, making it a good place for Roman tax collecting booths. Have you heard of the simplified 1040 form? It asks one question: how much money do you have? Then you write it in and it says, send it all in. Roman soldiers were stationed there to safeguard the tax money that was to be collected. So, now, can you think of an honor that you received that was a total surprise to you? Something that you weren't expecting. You didn't ask for. You didn't campaign for it. But it was a compliment or an honor. How about somebody springing a birthday party on you? And they shower you with gifts and cards and things like that. Well, what is an example of praise that you received that you would not otherwise give yourself? You remember what those elders said about the centurion? This man really loves this nation. But he wasn't going to blow his own horn, was he? How does it feel to be praised or honored when you don't feel worthy of that honor? What were the words of the centurion? Please don't bother, Lord. You just say the word. I don't have to have you here. I don't feel worthy enough. This wasn't false humility. I think this is genuine humility in an individual. So, the first 5 verses we have looked at, we have a situation in Capernaum, verse 1, where Jesus has come. This is his HQ. The verses 2 and 3 talk about a special request that comes from the centurion. But he doesn't show up in person. At least that's the way Luke records it. Matthew says something else. If you have your Bibles, open your Bibles at the 8th chapter of Matthew. And I'm going to read you what it says here. This is from verse 5, Matthew 8. When he had entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him. What does Luke say they did? He sent messengers, elders. And behold, that's another story. A centurion came forward to him, appealing to him, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed and suffering terribly. He doesn't say he's dying. And he said to him, I will come and heal him. That's what Jesus said. And the centurion replied, Lord, now this is intersecting where Luke addresses, I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I say to the one, go, and he goes. Another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. And when Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those, so undoubtedly, we're talking about the same incident. Yes?
But keep in mind, Matthew would have been an eyewitness, Luke would not.
Not. He gets it secondhand. So truly I tell, he says, I marvel at this individual, and to those who followed him. Truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west, and recline at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. There's a little bit of future. He says, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness. Who are the sons of the kingdom? We're talking about the Jews of this time. He says, and in that, he says, they'll be thrown into outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And to the centurion, Jesus said, go, let it be done, for as you have believed. And the servant was healed at that very moment. So we have Jesus not coming to the house, but talking to the centurion. And verses 4 and 5 is we have Luke's account of a group of insistent elders. He loves the Jewish nation.
So, Gordon, could you tell us a little bit more about who the elders would have been? I mean, not Pharisees.
This would have been the elders associated with the synagogue that was built.
Or it could have been just Jewish, like they had clans
Yes.
leaders, respected people.
Yeah, kind of like those who sit at the city gates and help make judgments. That kind of they have a great reputation, and they came to speak well of this particular man, the centurion.
When we start out, it's primarily the Pharisees that are after him. Then we get Pharisees and scribes. Then we go to adds the elders and the chief priests.
Yeah. So here are a couple of things. What do you think? In what ways can our congregation act as a go-between in connecting our resources to those who are in need? Isn't that our mission? It's not always about talking about having Bible studies, although Bible studies are a wonderful introduction. But when you connect with someone's human needs, the church must not forget to connect with the human needs of others, as well as their spiritual needs, known or not known. So, digging in a wee bit deeper, Kay, I know you like that phrase. How can our congregation partner with our sister congregations in that regard? I'll give you an example. Back-to-back fires in our community. This congregation became a conduit for relief, for funds. Do you remember the day a group of Korean people showed up who bought 12 wheelbarrows at Home Depot. They heard about the fire. They called us, and we went and picked up the wheelbarrows that these Korean visitors bought, and found out our church was working with the disaster relief efforts for the Churches of Christ. And also, our brethren at the East Side congregation also became the conduit during that period of time where a lot of the same materials. That was in those years when it was back-to-back devastating fire. That's a prime example of what can be achieved. Now, Galatians 6, 9 to 10. Let us not be weary, let's not get tired, in doing good, for we will reap, we'll benefit in due season if we don't give up. So then, as we have opportunity, let's do what is good toward all men, and especially toward those who are of the household of faith. So there's two groups here. A household of faith, that means brothers and sisters in Christ, regardless of what congregation they go to, or in what state, or in what city they're from. If we heard about a need and we were so inclined to reach out and help, we've done it. Not everybody believes what we believe. And we should not withhold doing good when we have an opportunity to do good just because they don't believe what we believe. What did Jesus say about helping your enemy? He says you are heaping burning coals upon their head. In other words, you're giving them something to think about. So, Ephesians 2 and 14. For he himself, Christ, is our peace, who has made the two one, Jew and Gentile one. Something new, something different. That's why Jesus built his church. So that out of the two would come something brand new, something out of, we call it the new birth. Not a church for Jews and a church for Gentiles, a church for whites, a church for blacks, a church for the English and a church for Scottish. Oh yeah, I like that one. He says, who has made the two one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility. You know something, brethren? There are still dividing walls of hostility that we must remove. So, what other types of barriers remain in place that would keep us from reaching out into our community at large? There's a whole list. When we restrict doing good to those only of the household of faith, how are we going to reach the rest of the world? I'm not proposing a social gospel. Far from it. But I'm telling you, sometimes that's where the preaching and teaching of the gospel ends. When we see people who are hurting, they feel lost, they feel pain, and we reach out and we try to help. So, now, part 2, the unmatched faith, Luke 6 through 10. Now, this centurion is unusual, isn't he? He certainly outshines those of Jesus' day, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes, the teachers of the law, because they were rather insular. They were inward looking, not outward looking. And this man's faith astonished Jesus. And then Jesus performs a remote healing. Hence, the start of about things that are done remotely. You know, if you can find the right remote to do it. But
Done the same thing for Lazarus, but healing Lazarus, you needed to make a point.
yes. You know, we can, through the wonder of the internet, David, send funds all the way across the globe to places like the Ukraine, to Israel. Oh, and dare I say it, the people who are caught in the middle, the people of Gaza. That's remote help. But you know, there's also something one-on-one, person to person. There's nothing quite like it. So, what do you think? How will you show? You know, did you hear about the guy who won a medal for humility? And they took it off him because he wore it every day. How will you show? And I'm being humble and I will ignore that bell. How will you show humility as you come before God? Say, for instance, in your prayers and petitions. God doesn't owe us anything. It requires humility. And digging in a wee bit deeper, in what ways is humility crucial for your formation into being more like Jesus? And how does James 4, 6 through 10, what did James talk about? What is friendship with the world? It's enmity with God. But yet, we have to be in the world, but not of the world. How can you demonstrate great faith, strong faith, amazing faith, humble faith in our local neighborhood, in this city, in our country? And digging in a little bit deeper, what distractions do you need to remove in order to live with a great faith? I thought you were bringing me a sandwich, Ralph. Here's what James wrote, verses 6 through 10. And he gives grace generously, as the scripture said. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. I think that's Proverbs 4:36 from the Greek translation of the Old Testament. So humble yourselves before God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come close to God, and he will come close to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, purify your hearts, for your loyalty is divided between God and the world. Let there be tears for what you have done. Let there be sorrow and deep grief. Let there be sadness instead of laughter, and gloom instead of joy. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up in honor. God does not require us to promote ourselves. If God's going to do any promoting, it will be done by God. So, that passage is what we call God's elevator. He elevates us when it's His will to do so. And sometimes God takes us down. Now, words of power, especially when they're spoken by God. Luke 7, verse 8, "For I myself am a man under authority," the centurion said, "with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes. That one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it." He understood that Jesus had greater authority than even the centurion. Matthew 8:13, Luke 7:9 through 10, "Go, and it shall be done for you as you have believed." It's about having centurion faith. What is that? When we offer intercessory prayer, we exercise the faith of the centurion. Jesus is not here in the flesh, so any healing, any good that will be done takes place will be through remote power, remote healing. Our nation needs healed, folks. Instead of bitterness, we need to do better. We need to be better. We need to be more like Jesus. Centurion faith is believing in Jesus' authority. When we fix Come in. Centurion faith is believing in Jesus' authority. When we fix our eyes on Him, we show centurion faith. Just say the word, Lord, and I know it shall be so. The centurion used his wealth, he used his influence to protect the Jews, to provide for them a place for their community, to be able to study the Torah, the scriptures. And when his household was in need, when that man's house was in need, his character and his actions were thus remembered. So, that is the end of the lesson. Let me just take it on into real life, church. And the lesson is yours. Next week is the faith of an anointer. Try and say that 10 times. Thank you.